wheelchair table.
Here?
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
That's where you sign in here?
I think so. Double check. I'm pretty sure I
There's lots of things.
Oh.
All over. Go look at the, you wanna see, are you timing?
No, my friend wanted me to watch her, and I don't know where.
So what is she doing?
She's doing forensics?
No, what, she's doing date?
Yeah.
The debate schedule for today, it's in the LC.
Okay. Thanks.
See,
Adios.
adios. This is another day I've gone without eating anything.
Why? You're so busy.
Yes. Didn't eat a thing. Did they bring blue fit or something for the kids? The visitors?
Can we move this back for the judges table, please? Can I have that timer table, Najma? Timer?
Yeah,
Over here.
Judges here.
Oh, just one judge. One judge.
I don't see 5 here.
5 what?
Judges.
No.
Judges, timer, and seats. Okay. It said 5 seats.
No, bring that table over here. 5 seats can see them over there for the podium. So can you take that plastic chair? I mean the This is the team 1. We need 2 chairs here.
This is team 2.
That's team 2 of the team. Team 2.
The guys need the screen.
I don't think so. Okay. Team 2, and this can go back. Give them some breathing space.
Dude, I was just reading the thing. Look at, doesn't it look like it says 5 desks?
Judges, timer, seats, yeah, they're right. You're absolutely right. That wasn't me.
It's okay. هذا مكسور من واحدة تانية.
من judge and timer. Timer? Okay, that's your stuff there. Okay, stop this. Stop. Stop this one more. You're good to go, all right? Thank you.
This is your sister's notebook and it's been like forever. I guess she was
Are you also going to be here?
In la clase?
Sí.
No. I don't judge till tomorrow, and I have to go home. Because our kitchen came. I have to go see what happened. Yeah. Hey, how are you, honey? Good, alhamdulillah. Hey, listen, can I have the charger again so I can leave? And go check on the kitchen. What is your timing? All right, so then I'll just see you.
Hello? Yes.
Yeah. I'm in my room.
Spanish class.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know, like, I've been waiting here because they said people are
أكثر معارك كويس حاجات يعني أكثر المصاعب الجديدة الكويس معايا مرة فين لكن الجديد مع الكويس يلا
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'll be starting to get, they're in meetings right now. Okay, so it's gonna happen. What?
No, no.
Loverly. Big timing. Yeah, what do you do? The day. What do I know? It's a little bit too. Who's your judge? I think Mr. Bowman, I'm not sure though. Oh. Alrighty, bye-bye.
Wait, how do we know where to sit? You guys want to take a side?
Yeah,
Which side is it?
that one. This is
That one doesn't specify anything.
the right, this one? This one, that one.
Would you like an aisle
Oh my
seat?
god, there's a camera.
Oh, is it live streaming?
Oh, I think it's someone watching it. No, they can't see that. It's just live stream.
I'll do this one.
Hi, friends.
My name is
Can we make her smile, please?
Yes, we'll.
You make me feel like you
How much
make
like-
me feel like you're gonna get eaten.
Well, I'm not
And I'm on
for
your
50%.
Yeah, I'm very intimidating. Good job.
It's very intimidating.
True.
I open my speech. I shall. Okay. First, we're gonna take
Who's hiding her
She's sort of like exactly
in the shell? So,
Well, I think
and they're asking,
You're
where's
saying
your,
that
yeah,
The moral of the story?
yeah. And they're asking. I'm just saying,
my jacket.
it's in a box and it's inside the shell.
I don't know why I have this. It's an HDMI.
You've showed that to me like 7 times.
No.
No longer funny. No smiling. No smiling allowed. But only from your team.
He's so easy on us.
Anyway.
No,
This is the competition. I know how I go.
You do, you do.
I already have a pencil. I think I stole this from Mr. Bell.
Okay, just don't make this fun. I don't have a pencil.
Oh,
You want pencils? This is zero.
oh yeah, Leanne. Guess what? I
Well,
have
that's our
pencils
pencils.
everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had two in my bag, so I'm sorry now. Probably take some from this one.
No, but maybe they'll go.
Hello.
Elevated time which is the day.
Cool.
I mean, you know our mom would talk about it.
This is the PSAT equivalent. It doesn't really.
Yes. Are you the judge? No. Who's the judge?
Do you want to do it?
It's Mr.
It's Mr.
Bowman.
Bowman. If you want to do it. Sorry.
There he is.
I'm here.
Do we get pencils for doing it? We find pencils. Room one.
Yeah, we need your own pen. Not this is true. Yes. Well, in this round there, and all the other rounds.
Presumably, if you need around pencil, you guys need around.
We're not prepared at all.
There's no on any document that is off.
Is anyone on? Oh, one person. Hello.
Well, this is-
Just getting ready for call. You don't have a call, do you?
We do.
You do? Okay. I was expecting it in my folder. Nope. Call it.
No.
Jude, call it.
Fails.
I will take pro.
You wanna go first or second? Okay. Pro. First. I hope he's speaking first. Who's speaking first?
Are we going?
No.
Yes, he is. Sorry.
I'm gonna get to the clock.
Can I just see that you have Wi-Fi turned off?
I have everything on.
Yeah.
We'll bring people.
Thank you. Okay.
My partner and I are here today to make the strongest affirmative case that NGOs are far more effective than governments at improving the lives of disadvantaged people. Some definitions for the argument are for disadvantaged, quote, unable to attain basic conditions and resources such as civil rights, shelter, adequate education, and medical care. Improve as, quote, to enhance in value or in quality, make better. Both those are provided by Merriam-Webster. And for specificity, revolving around the resolution, an NGO is, quote, a nonprofit organization that operates independently of any government, typically one whose purpose is to address a social or political issue. Our points include NGOs providing healthcare and disaster relief with regards specifically to the 2010 Haiti earthquake and vaccinations in Africa and child marriage with evidence from South Asia. We believe that NGOs pick up the slack that governments leave behind, as NGOs are more effective than governments. Contention 1 I want to make is on healthcare. Governments, particularly in Africa, where the disadvantaged people are in far greater need of assistance than those in first world countries, fail to provide healthcare effectively onto enough of the population. According to AIDNA International, there's only one doctor per 2,000 people in Nigeria, which has more doctors per person than most of its African neighbors, the exception being South Africa. Stanford is quoted as saying that fewer than 50% of Africans have access to modern healthcare facilities. This is where an NGO such as Doctors Without Borders comes in. Doctors Without Borders, who are active in over 70 countries, many of them being developing nations, provide for the basic healthcare needs for the people, which, as mentioned earlier, the government cannot do. The Gates Foundation, famous for its work in vaccinations, does the majority of its work in distributions through the GAVI Alliance. Since 2000, the GAVI Alliance has vaccinated over 760 million children, preventing over an estimated 13 million deaths. My second contention is human rights, specifically child marriage, a practice common in poor and rural areas in South Asia. UNICEF reports that child marriage is in fact a violation of human rights. Quote, child marriage is a violation of human rights. It compromises the development of girls and boys. All these factors make it impossible to break the vicious circle of poverty, particularly for girls, says Osama Kugali, a UN representative. In 2013, the UN Human Rights Council stated that between 2011 and 2020, more than 140 million girls will be married off, oftentimes for financial reasons, before their 18th birthday. Over half of these child marriages occur in South Asia. Child marriage has been illegal in India since 1929, says National Geographic. Despite the fact that this law has been in place for a long time, the prevalence indicates the government is either unwilling or unable to stop this crisis. Again, this is where NGOs step in. In Pakistan, they successfully lobbied for the legal marriage age to be raised from 16 to 18 for girls, and despite the lack of available statistics, momentum towards ending child marriage is growing quickly. My third contention is disaster relief, for which I will be providing information from the infamous 2010 Haiti earthquake. Also, Medium.com is quoted as saying that NGOs remain main players in disaster relief around the globe. I stress, not governments. This is because NGOs provide more effective relief, they provide it faster and without hesitation, and can appeal to the global community for funding on demand, something a government with a fixed budget cannot do. According to worldvision.org, over 3 million people were affected by the earthquake in Haiti. That's almost as many as the population of Oman. Half the affected population became internally displaced. There were 250,000 deaths and 300,000 injuries. CS Monitor reported that the government did nothing for 4 days. While they did nothing, NGOs sprung into action. In the 12 months following the natural disaster, Habitat for Humanity UK alone helped over 250,000 people with infrastructure, medical aid, and more. To conclude, I must affirm that indeed NGOs are more effective than governments at providing aid to the most disadvantaged people through relief for unforeseen disasters, such as the Haiti earthquake, healthcare in Africa and rural Africa, and the defense of civil rights and human rights in the case of defending women's and children's rights not to be married before their 18th birthday.
We negate the resolution that on balance, non-governmental organizations are more effective than governments at improving the lives of disadvantaged people. Today, as a first speaker, I'll be looking into how different governments are donating money to help other countries with education for refugees in their country, how the countries are putting in efforts to reduce poverty in their country, and countries are putting in more time to help with the aid of women. To begin, different governments are donating money to help other countries with education for the refugees in their country. For example, according to the UNHCR, there are 657,445 refugees in Jordan. 80% of these people are below the poverty line, and 51% are children. This caused Australia, Canada, the European Union, Germany, Norway, the UK, and the US to announce that they would be donating 51 million Jordanian dollars to the Jordanian government to accelerating access to quality formal education for Syrian refugee children. Canada also announces that they are donating another 1.5 million Canadian dollars for strategic education. This shows that the governments are not only trying to improve their countries, but also trying to help countries that have been affected due to different crises. Another thing is that the Canadian government is striving to reduce poverty by 50% by 2030. They plan to do this using 5 programs in order to achieve their target. Already, there have been significant investments for children, seniors, low-wage workers, and other vulnerable Canadians which are having immediate impacts on reducing poverty. To state, the 5 programs are: 1, a Canada Child Benefit, which is basically a monthly tax-free payment that families receive to help with the cost of raising children. Along with that, roughly 65% of families receiving the highest amount are single parents, and of this, 9% are single mothers. 2, Guaranteed Income Supplement, which is a monthly tax-free benefit to assist low-income seniors receiving Old Age Security (OAS) pension. Low-income seniors receiving OAS, according to Service Canada, helped 1.94 million people in 2017, which is roughly 1/3 of pensioners. 3, National Housing Strategy is a 10-year investment plan worth $40 billion focused on providing more affordable housing options. According to the website, the National Housing Strategy website, it will cut chronic homelessness in half, remove 530,000 from housing need, and invest in the construction of up to 100,000 new affordable homes. A $4.3 billion investment funded through federal and provincial governments will go towards helping to build and protect the community and social housing, as well as strategies to keep housing affordable. 4, Indigenous Skills and Employment Training Program. This provides Indigenous people, a population that makes up roughly 1/4 of shelter users, with different programs and training to help find a job or develop skills in relation to their career. This plan states that this investment will support roughly 15,000 more Canadians with finding jobs and developing career-related skills. There are over 90 Indigenous agreement holders across the country which act as service points to access these programs. 5, Canada Workers Benefit, which will provide low-income Canadians with a refundable tax credit to supplement their wages. According to a report by the Department of Finance, this program will be made possible by a $1 billion investment from the government helping low-income working Canadians. Lastly, the majority of NGOs have little or no access to reliable email and internet connections. They receive almost no literature on development issues and are generally out of touch with issues on global, regional, and international importance. NGOs are also perceived to be driven by short-term projects, approaches that are not locally sustainable. They pay high salaries and attract local NGO staff. They are also responsible for creating the high-cost image that undermines the credibility of the sector. And a new report from a leading British research institute suggests that an expensive decade-long NGO program, the Millennium Villages Project, came nowhere close to meeting its goals. The program, spearheaded by Columbia University economist Jeffrey Skaggs, aimed to prove that a simultaneous focus on education, health, agriculture, and small business development could transform living standards at the village level. Other research published this year concurred that the project's investments did not lead to expected outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, we have 30 seconds. Yep.
Time.
You can do it, Chris.
I can do it. No, it's 3 minutes.
Yes.
So you mentioned that NGOs are only able to carry out short-term projects. Can you provide any examples for any?
Wouldn't you say that the governments are able to help more since the NGOs pick up the slack?
Since NGOs pick up the slack of the government? Could you clarify that statement or question?
So essentially, that you said NGOs pick up the slack, but wouldn't you say that governments are able to help more?
I would disagree with that statement respectfully because I feel governments have the burden of solving nearly all of the country's problems when NGOs have the capacity for focusing only on one problem, which would make it more effective, make them specialize in that area specifically. So you mentioned that governments help improve the conditions in their own countries, yet you failed to provide any examples of that.
When I spoke about Canada, this is them helping with their 5 ways. So I don't understand what you mean by failed. You said how India had already made child marriage illegal and then stated that NGOs in Pakistan got the legal age of marriage gone from 16 to 18. How would this help in Pakistan but not Pakistan? In India but not Pakistan?
Could you rephrase that?
Essentially, since you said that India made child marriage illegal, and then you stated that NGOs in Pakistan got the legal age of marriage gone from 16 to 18, and you did. How does this help in India but not Pakistan?
I don't quite understand how that is relevant. So you mentioned in your introductory statement that governments provide aid for women. You also failed to provide any evidence for or statistics for that.
Well, as a matter of fact, in Canada, for example, they had set out a goal to reach by 2020, and they actually reached that by 3 years ahead, in which in that goal was to help women and mothers. And now they're setting a goal to reduce poverty by 50% by 2030. So it's the same idea, and they accomplished their goal for 2020. So why not? Why won't they accomplish it?
Do you have any statistics for current beneficiaries?
Currently, they're still working on it, but it says Statistics Canada released results from their 2017 Canadian Income Survey, which revealed that the poverty reduction strategy's interim target of reducing poverty by 20% by 2020 had already been reached a full 3 years ahead of schedule. By meeting this target, Canada has reached its lowest poverty rate in history.
Yes, so you mentioned that NGOs in a certain region don't have access to internet yet. Don't you agree that governments also don't have access to internet?
No, I would agree, and my partner would also touch upon that.
You have follow-up questions on our conventions?
Could you rephrase what you said about India?
Time.
Go
You
ahead.
can ask, you can ask.
Go
it.
ahead.
You started the time was up, so you can ask. it.
Okay, can you rephrase what you said about India and child marriage?
India child marriage, just like what you said. So India, they basically made child marriage illegal, yet in more poor and rural areas, they still have this cultural tradition, not tradition, this practice of child marriage. So.
The second speech today, I will be reaffirming the fact that NGOs are more effective in improving the lives of disadvantaged people than governments, for the reasons that they pick up the slack that governments leave behind, by introducing some new points on poverty and going into some detail about how they also help with education. So the fourth contention in our case is poverty, specifically extreme poverty. To explain this more, the World Bank has defined poverty to be, quote, or extreme poverty to be, quote, living on less than $1.90 US per day. In 2015, 10% of the world lives in extreme poverty. And while there has been a general decline in extreme poverty, some regions are yet to experience a significant decline. In fact, more than half of the world's extreme poor live in sub-Saharan Africa, one of the few regions to show an increase in the number of extreme poor. The World Bank also states that the majority of the global poor live in rural areas and are involved in the agricultural sector and are under the age of 18. Over 70% of the population in Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Malawi, Madagascar, and other countries live on less than $1.90 per day, compared to less than 1% of the population in Iceland, Germany, Estonia, and many other developed nations. Yes, you can be disadvantaged in a developed country like Canada, but you are still far more enabled than those who are not in developed nations. This is very relevant because our opponents brought up the fact that in Canada they have lots of social programs, but the government in Canada is able to have these programs where the governments in many of these other countries, where the citizens there are not economically sufficient, there's no tax money because they can't tax the their citizens enough, so they can't provide these services, which is where NGOs come. This directly correlates to education, as there is a correlation between education and poverty. So the fifth contention is education, how the most disadvantaged people in terms of education, those living in developing nations, do not have access to government education. I bring this up to point out that in developed nations with financially sufficient governments, being poor and disadvantaged does not limit you to having a very poor education. They have public education in many developed nations in Europe and North America. However, the vast majority of people do not live in developed nations according to World Population Review. This means that they often have no free or quality education available and must pay money that they can't always afford to send their children to school. I'll also add that it is due to poor education that women are put in positions where they have many children, which they can't afford to educate. And this cycle is very vicious and can only be broken through outside intervention, oftentimes from NGOs. Some examples: it costs $350 for 1 year of elementary school per child in Malawi, $650 per year of high school. Taking into account that the birth rate in Malawi is just over 4.5 children per woman, we use 4% or 4 children for the math example. It costs minimum $1,400 to send 4 children to school for 1 year. The GDP per capita in Malawi is $338. Education is simply not feasible with these numbers. This is where an NGO such as World Vision comes in to allow people to donate money and sponsor children financially. They do this through work with education and health and various other ministries. As of 2017, World Vision has sponsored over 3 million children and operates in over 100 countries. Furthermore, every 60 seconds, World Vision provides families with the means to alleviate poverty and give them the advantages they so need. This is critical because, as I said earlier, when you are not educated, you are put in a position that is not necessarily your fault, where you don't know about contraception, you don't know about family planning. And this means that you are bound to have more children. We see this with the elevated birth rates in developing countries compared to those in developed nations. And so because of this, there are more children that cannot be educated, and there are more uneducated children, and it's, as I said earlier, a very vicious cycle. So NGOs come in and pick up the slack that governments leave behind because, let's face it, governments just can't educate their population. Thank you.
As your second speaker today, I'll be negating the resolution that on balance, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, are more effective than governments in improving lives of disadvantaged people. Today, I will be bringing you points of how governments have more funding than NGOs, how NGOs have taken advantage of their power, and how governments are able to help with the poverty in the country. My first point, the first one I'm going to bring up is how the governments have more funding. They've said that NGOs can help with disaster relief, but governments are able to help with other things. One example is how they're able to provide steady, cheap, accessible healthcare. One example is in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And Sweden's government says that, quote, healthcare in Sweden is largely tax-funded, a system that ensures everyone has the equal access to healthcare services. And another place is how the UK aims to cut all homelessness in half by 2022 and end it all by 2027. They have vowed to put in £100 million to help, quote, bus sweepers, £30 million to help with their mental health, and another £50 million to attend to indoor options such as hostel and refuges. The second point I want to bring up is how NGOs have taken advantage of their power. One example is Moyni. Moyni was an American NGO which provided education and scholarships to girls in Liberia, where so that they focused on women's empowerment and protected young Liberian girls from sexual abuse and exploitation. Co-founder Macintosh Johnston was in charge of selecting the girls, and he was said to make a third of the girls after school. Another example is in Oxfam, with helping at the Haiti earthquake. In 2010, the the director of operations in Haiti was paying the women he was helping to have sex with him. When the government found out, they banned officers from helping due to them abusing their power and taking advantage of the situation. My third point is how they help with poverty in the country. Ethiopia has one of the biggest poverty rates in the world. However, over the past few years, the GDP has gone up, allowing the government to give out more civil servant jobs. This has also allowed more jobs to be opened up in different industries. The government is also able to improve their social services such as education, health, water, and sanitation, as well as infrastructure, including roads, railways, telecoms, and generators. The prevalence of undernourishment fell from 75% in 1990 to 1992 to 35% in 2000 from 2012 to 2014. The poverty rate has also dropped from 44% in 2000 to 30% in 2011, where they said poverty in developing countries are helped through the government. Ethiopia is showing otherwise, as they were able to help with the poverty in their country. They also said that poverty in developed countries are In conclusion, the government is just as effective as NGOs at improving lives of disadvantaged people due to them having more funding, and some NGOs are using their power and how governments are able to help with their poverty.
Yeah, time. So that they can have, or do I need time? Yes, thank you.
So you mentioned how there have been many increases in the welfare in Ethiopia. How much of this can actually be attributed to governments? Was it all governments, or was there NGO involved?
Well, it was due to the GDP rising and the government allowed them to help with their economy had gotten better. They were able to help with the population. Where it was, I'm sure NGOs helped in Ethiopia with the poverty, but governments help just as much. The government helps us as much. How come if people are not educated, they are put in a position to have children?
Well, there's a correlation between education and wealth. And so when you're not educated, you don't know about things such as contraception. And that means you are more likely to get pregnant. There's also a lot of research showing that how women in less economically developed regions, such as South Asia, are oftentimes sold into child marriage. And something like this means they're more likely to have children as they start having children earlier. So you mentioned that the British government aims to end homelessness by 2027, and they have promised money. Do you know how much money they've promised in time?
Oh, yes. They have promised to put in 100 million pounds.
So let me clarify, how much have they actually put in? How much money have they actually spent to this point?
Well, they have put in their money already, and
Do you have the number, or is it just
the money I said before. Why? How if third world countries are less enabled to than first world countries than countries in improving lives of disadvantaged people, how do you think how
There have been NGOs in Ethiopia, and yes, the government has also done something. I'm not saying that it's impossible, I'm saying that it is hard. So you said that universal healthcare governments in Canada and other countries have universal healthcare. I have a study here by the Mises Institute that proves that single payer healthcare, which is universal healthcare, is the worst kind of healthcare because when the government is funding everything, the quality goes down. How do you respond to this study?
Well, in Denmark, they have put in a lot of money in
trying to find the most effective way to help the people who come to their hospital. And they have one of the time, like if they are able to get the people who come to their hospital and able to really help them, and in less time than.
Thank you. Can we take 30 more seconds?
What about time?
Our contentions that affirm the resolution on balance, non-governmental organizations are more effective than governments at improving the lives of disadvantaged people have been healthcare, such as providing vaccines, particularly in Africa, providing disaster relief, especially in the infamous 2010 Haiti earthquake, where the government was unable to do anything for 4 consecutive days. And finally, helping restore human and civil rights in poor and rural areas in South Asia by establishing social media campaigns. Other opponents have brought up education, providing aid for women, and helping to alleviate poverty. Our arguments have clashed on the topics of specifically healthcare, and we have won these points of our clash due to our statistics provided by MISES or MISES. And in short, due to our points of healthcare, providing disaster relief, helping restore human and civil rights, education, and making an effort to alleviate poverty, our case is the most valid, and the resolution is true. NGOs are more effective than governments at improving the lives of disadvantaged people. Thank you.
Can we have 30 seconds, please?
Yep.
It was on 31. Time.
It's the green. I'm sorry, you can just stay seated.
No, she has to.
Oh, sorry. And you'll stand.
In summary, we have stated the points that the governments working together in order to donate money to disadvantaged people and essentially help refugees in their country. Along with that, we have the accomplishments of the Canadian government by reducing poverty by using their programs. On NGOs, they have lacked to do the same thing as as the Canadian government, for example, has done, which is set a goal and actually achieve it. And along with that, our partners said that they had poverty, and when they dealt with that, compared to how governments dealt with poverty, there has been a big difference, such as such as the Canadian government, who reduced it by 50%. Along with that, education. So governments donated money for education and the refugees, and they all worked together in order to get that task accomplished, while NGOs didn't do that as effectively. And also NGOs with the European situation. Yeah. And I'm here to affirm that our resolution is true. We negate the resolution.
It's ready? It is. Can you substantiate your claim that NGOs don't help refugees as well as the Canadian government has when it comes to the use of funding to help with the education of refugees?
We aren't saying that the NGOs don't help refugees, but we're saying that other governments have been also trying to help refugees through the government, the Canadian government. You said that universal health care was the worst form of healthcare, I believe. But if you use private healthcare or private hospitals, it gets really expensive. So how do you expect everyone to go get healthcare?
So the thing is, yes, it's universal, but you have to look at where the money is coming from. The government is taxing people, and often countries like Denmark and Sweden have a 40% income tax rate. This means the government has a lot of money. Private insurance just means that the money is not coming from the government that you pay to the government. The money is coming from you. This study I have says that when someone lives in a country with universal healthcare, they're more likely to take risks with their health because it's less likely going to be an economic consequence to them.
So you mentioned that Canada has been helping with alleviating poverty, but you're talking about on balance here, and you also made a statement about governments being more effective in helping alleviate poverty, yet we have here that over 70% of the population in Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Malawi, and Madagascar live in under $1.90 per day.
As we said, not only did we say Canada, but we also said the UK, about how they are also trying to end homelessness. And also, we talked about Ethiopia, which is a developing country, and they had a really big poverty rate before the government stepped in to help. You said that you didn't see how India not having the child marriage, having a law into child marriage was not helping, but you said that Pakistan then raised the law from 16 to 18 for legal marriage. But wouldn't you say that it would just have the same outcome as India?
So India does have a law, and they've had one since 1929. However, they're not enforcing it. Of the over 1,500 convictions or arrests made on the grounds of child marriage, less than 300 people were actually sent to jail. So you mentioned how Ethiopia has had a decline in poverty. It went from 44% to 30%. That is still incredibly high. Are you saying that 30% poverty is a good number and that they've been very effective?
No, I'm not saying that's something very effective, but I'm just saying that they have been putting in efforts to help with the poverty in the country, and it's only been a couple of years since it started, so they are able to put in more time, and the more that their GDP is rising, then they're able to help more.
zoning, you take the resolution. We have the rest of our time, it should be in the. Yes.
Time.
In conclusion, my partner and I have decisively proven that the resolution is on balance, NGOs are more effective than governments at improving the lives of disadvantaged people. It is true, and that NGOs pick up the slack that governments leave behind. Our opponents have failed to clarify how NGOs don't have access to internet or email while governments supposedly do. They haven't provided any statistics as to how Norway helps people more effectively using the socialized healthcare. We have provided the option for them to look at a study we have that says that single-payer healthcare is not more effective. They haven't really provided any statistics as to why Ethiopia's economy rose. They just said it would come back. We have proven that NGOs are better in disaster relief through their faster action and their continued action, while the government in Haiti was reeling from the effects of the earthquake for years after the earthquake happened. We've also proven how NGOs help with education in very poor countries, such as Malawi. While Ethiopia is a poor country and still has a poverty rate of 30%, they are less poor than the people in Malawi, as over 70% of the people in Malawi live on less than $1.90 per day. Yes, our opponents brought up a very valid point that there have been very unfortunate incidents with NGOs abusing their power. However, we're talking about on balance. And them bringing up one or two examples of how an NGO has abused their power is relevant when I can provide examples of NGOs doing actual good, such as Habitat for Humanity UK helping with disaster relief in Haiti, such as World Vision helping educate over 3 million people in over 100 countries, such as International, the Gates Foundation, Girls Not Brides, such as the Gavi Alliance. All of these things prove that on balance, NGOs are more effective than governments at improving the lives of disadvantaged people.
Can we take the rest of our time, please? Should you need this time? It's 1:54. Time.
ready? We negate the resolution that non-governmental organizations and NGOs are more effective than governments in improving lives of disadvantaged people. My partner has talked about how Canada has been reducing poverty in reducing poverty in their country, how governments have donated money to other governments so that they can help with the situations that we are going through, and how NGOs lack research and are to pay more money to their local people to work there so that they attract more people, which means that they aren't spending their money as wisely, and they have said nothing about that point to combat it. They also haven't provided any stats that the people in the countries that they stated with the 70% poverty rate are more are in more poverty than the people in Ethiopia, they also only just mentioned how NGOs have taken advantage of their power. These NGOs were highly respected NGOs. More Than Me was an NGO that Obama and Oprah talked about and said that they should donate money. And the American government had donated $600,000 to More Than Me. And these are big NGOs, which is why so many people know about these situations where these smaller NGOs that could be doing this without anyone knowing, and it wouldn't be taken off, and they would still be able to gain the money that they are, since they are smaller NGOs and not many people would know about it. I also mentioned the point about how governments have more funding, and they said that the universal health care is not good health care, but I don't know how they expect people to have other health care options if it's not universal health care. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, good job. We can go on back to the team and come up and then I'll check. Yeah, we're done. Yeah, the waits are.
Thank you for judging us.
Oh,
Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for really enjoying to see you guys. Good job, guys. It was fun.
Good job, guys. Good job, man.
Pleasure to debate.
You'll impress the other team when you do that without being asked.
Okay, we'll do that.
I'm gonna do it, we're on such good terms.
You have another or?
About 15 minutes, is that right?
Yes, my name is Mr. The teacher, my teacher.
No, it's not commemorative.
It doesn't tell you the authority. Okay, let's try it. So I did like this.
See, how do you work it?
What would you do? Oh my god, I get it. Oh my god, that's so smart. How do you get it?
Okay, so let's
to
restart.
reset it, you just press long. And then
Okay.
to start, you can set either side and just press.
Okay.
And you stop. And I just
Okay.
figured out
How do you continue?
You press memory. So it says,
No, I
new.
think that's skip to 3.
No, that's the new, that's the one, and that's the new one. Get it? Okay.
No, I don't get it.
So this is 9, this is 11. Keep it going, this one will, keep going, this one will restart. Do you see it? But why did you start it? No,
Hi.
Hello.
I'm supposed to be judging here.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Yeah,
My
I'm
point is if you
timer.
mess up,
Yeah.
and you're timing, and you mess up, you just press memory, and it'll keep going on top, and the new one will start here. So you
Just
just
at the end,
I
I count this one.
yeah. I mean, and then if they ask you for like extra time and you already started, you just press memory, and then this is like the time, whatever, and this is the memory time. Oh wait, we're doing auto read anyways.
Yeah,
but
order
it doesn't even matter that much because it's like 8 minutes.
Okay.
You just have to shut the. We don't need that for. 8 minutes.
That little video, we're supposed to do exactly. Okay.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Ah,
Am I gonna be sitting up here?
Yeah,
Okay.
here. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter where you sit.
I wanna extract them.
Mhm.
And how many speakers are there?
I don't know, there should be a list, maybe it's in the,
Maybe it's here.
Yeah. maybe I don't know.
I guess maybe by the amount of
Yeah, there should be
1,
like a,
2,
oh, here,
3,
so 3.
oh,
So
and
she's first, and then.
Okay.
So I think we have to go, I have to go get them, right, from the room? To tell them to enter?
Sure.
Let me just check.
Can
Yeah?
someone's reading or supposed to?
Also, are we supposed to go get them from a room? Because when I did impromptu, I had to go get them from a room and tell them to come in. Like the
Oh,
contest, like the speakers, I have to go bring them in from a room.
Oh, I heard I'm supposed to do that. Oh, I had the LACS people say anyway, you have to go. So here it says, do we do it every minute?
It says on paper not to, but when I did impromptu, I did it every minute because it's helpful for them.
Yeah.
So just do it every minute,
I
so
think we
it
would do it every
helps them.
minute, yeah, and then,
And then at the end, there's 7.5, you just put 30 seconds.
so it's only 8 minutes and we did it.
Yeah, but then the next person comes, it depends how many people you have. But also, you're not supposed to say anything at the end, remember, you can't say anything.
Yeah, only the debate you get to see. So it was interesting, I thought it was really.
It was so interesting because, okay, basically they go and they get like 3 topics and they have to like quickly choose one. They only get 30 seconds to read it. And then they have to start writing a speech for only 1 minute. And then they have to start speaking. Like imagine, and the topics were hard. I looked at them, like they were actually hard. Like it was, I can't even remember. Like it was like a quote by Aristotle. And they had to like, oh my god. And you have to talk for 3 minutes. That's a long
That's
time.
a really long. I remember it there for 8 minutes. But then it messed up. Maybe Kelly actually.
And that one you got as much time as you wanted. For French.
No, No, the one, the 3-minute one, that was time, yeah.
We'll figure out if to get them.
My judge is not even there yet. Oh.
So you let me know, how much their time was when they're finished, right?
Yeah.
So that I can write it